Hello to my fashion students. I'm going to show you how to draft a trouser pattern. So first, the sketch that you see here on the table, this is the sketch of the trouser that we're doing. So it's going to have one dart in the front on each side, one dart on the back on each side, inseam pockets, and a waistband. What I'm using for the measurements is from the standard measurement chart, the size 8. You should have all of those in your emails. The other thing I'm going to be working with then is the directions that are from the textbook on page 573. So what I want you to see first is that in that first page of directions, they're asking for some measurements, the measurements that you will need. So it's important to go back to the standard measurement chart and get those measurements and put them into this section. It's going to make it a lot easier as you're drafting not to have to go look up these figures. The other thing is we're going to start with a piece of pattern paper, and I'd like you to start with 30 inches by 40 inches. Okay, as far as the numbers that are in here, I'll go through those quickly. For the first one, the waist to ankle, we're using a measurement of 37 inches. Crotch depth, 9 3/4 inches. Front hip arc, 8 7/8 inches. Back hip arc, 9 3/8 inches. Front arc is 6 3/4, and back waist arc is 6 3/8. Okay, so those are the important measurements that we're going to be using. All right, so now we're going to start following the directions as you see here. So the first thing it's asking us to do is to create a line sent down the center of your paper, or approximately the center. Draw that line, and we're doing 37 inches because we decided that was what our total length was going to be. So at that point, I want you to, as in the diagram here, write A at the top and B at the bottom. The next thing that we're going to do is A to D is the crotch depth plus 3/4 inch ease. So if you go back to the standard measurement chart, you'll find that the crotch depth is, and we have it here, number 24, is 9 3/4 inches. So adding 3/4 inches to that, it comes to 10 1/2. So what we'll be marking there is A to D, which is going to be at that 10 1/2. So from A down to D at 10 1/2, you're going to mark D, and that's going to be our crotch depth. Then the next direction is D to C. It's the hip depth, so it's 1/3 of D to A. So here we're going to look at that our full amount that they're asking us to do a third of is 10 1/2. So half, or a third of 10 1/2 is 3 1/2. So that is telling me to go 3 1/2 inches up, and here mark C, and that's going to be our hip. Okay, up here is the waist, and down at the very bottom where B was, that's going to be at the hem area. So you can start to see that this will be the pant from the top to the bottom. Okay, the next thing it's asking us to do is B to E. It's the knee depth. So we're going to be, to do that, we're going to be taking halfway between B and D, which one way we can do that halfway point is we can just fold our paper up where you can, and I can see through because I'm working in marker, and we figure out that halfway point and we can pinch it. And then that gives us half without having to do all the measurements. But the directions are telling us to go from that mark and go up 1 inch. So I would measure 1 inch up, and of course using the paper, the dotted paper, that mark that when I folded it was right here, so 1 inch would be just one of the squares up. I don't even have to measure it. And that's going to be E, and that's going to be the knee area. Okay, the next thing that we need to do going on to figure 2 is we're going to find out what the measurement will be for the back hip plus a 1/4 inch ease. So working toward this side, toward the left side of your page, we're going to want to go to 9 5/8 inch. So at 9 5/8 from C, I'm going to go over, and I will mark that out to become letter F. Okay, the next direction is to do the same to get D to G. And D to G is going to be the same as C to F. So we're going to go across there as well. And that becomes G. And then the same thing on the top, we're going to do A to H. A to H, and it's at that same measurement. 9 and 5/8. Okay, so once we get that, we're going to letter that number H. Okay? Then what we can do is we can connect these lines. So we can connect and square off. So this is going to turn into a square. So double check that you've got your 9 3/8 on each one. Yes, I do. And it should go directly down. And I'm working in marker so that you can see things. So I would erase and I would actually move that one back a little bit if I was working in pencil because I'm off a little bit, but it's not going to, it shouldn't bother you. The next direction down is from G to X, and it's telling us it's 1/2 of G to H. So here's G to H, we need the halfway point. So again, we can do the pinch, and we're gonna pinch it there. And as a matter of fact, pinch the whole way across, and you'll see why later why we did that. Now we're gonna call this X. Okay, and then the final thing on the back is we're going to create what becomes lengthening the crotch line, and it's going to be 1/2 of G to D. So G to D is measuring 9 1/2. So half of that measurement is going to be 4, or actually it's measuring 9. And so half of the measurement is going to be 4, oh, it was 9 5/8. So it's going to be 4 7/8. So if we extend it to there, that's going to give us the letter we're going to call I. Okay, now we're going to move to the front. So on the top left, top right side of your paper are the directions for that. So C to J is the front hip plus a 1/4 inch ease. So I calculated that out and it comes out to 9 1/8. So straight from C, we're going to want to go 9 1/8. And again, it is straight out. And that's going to give me letter J. Okay, the next thing, D to K, which we're going to do the same thing we did on the other one, where we're going to make these exactly the same length. So again, straight out, and we're going to call that one K. And then straight out from the top, same amount, that's 9 1/8. We're going to come out, oops, and that will be L. Okay, so the other thing that we have to do is, again, that halfway point. Oh, maybe I didn't pinch quite straight. So if I check out where my pinch mark was, that was the halfway point again. That's there. We're going to call that X. And then we're also going to connect all of these three together. Same thing we did on the other side. Okay, so we're marked there. So now the final thing on this piece is we have to figure out the front crotch. And according to the measurements, it should be 2 inches and 1/4. Because it's supposed to be a fourth of K to D. So it's actually 1/4 of this section. So that looks just right. And then we're going to letter that M. Okay, now we're moving down to the back dart area. And so for the back dart, again, oh, and one thing we should note is that this is the back and this is the front. So now as we talk about the back, it's going to be anything from that line this way. Front is the opposite way. Okay, so the next thing that we want to do is H to N. So you can see up on this corner from H, we want to go in 3/4 of an inch and mark a spot and call it N. Then the next thing that it's telling us is the waist measurement plus 2 inches. So what we're going to do is look at the waist measurement, the front arc measurement on our chart, and it's 6 3/4. So we're going to do that, oops, I'm sorry, on the back arc, back waist arc is 6 3/8. So what it's asking us to do that is that measurement, 6 3/8 plus 2 inches. So 6 3/8 plus 2 inches is 8 3/8. And so it's taking me very close to A, right? I'm coming in quite close to A. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is in the center area between N and A, I want to, that's where the dart will be located. So it's measuring 8 inches, so my center would be 4. And for this particular one, we're going to be doing a 2-inch dart, 1 2-inch dart. So we're changing it from the directions. So we're going to still go straight down 4.5 inches. So that we will follow the direction on. But instead, we've decided we wanted 1 dart instead of 2, so we've combined the 2 that they're asking for. So here, 1 inch on each side of that center will give me a 2-inch dart, which then we can draw the legs into it. The next thing that we're going to do is the same thing on the front. We'll be placing the front dart. So here we take the waist measurement of 6 3/4 plus 1 inch, because we're going to be putting a 1-inch dart. So that would be 7 3/4. Here we do not move or go from N, we go from L. So our amount is going to be 7 3/4, and that will come to about here. Okay. The final step of this part is to then figure out the dart placement for the front. So we're going to go halfway between L and Q. We're going to mark out the center. This will be the center of the dart. We want our dart on the front to be 1 inches, but we're going to draw the down line 3.5. And then, so 1/2 inch on each side of the dart line, we will be creating the legs of the dart. Okay, so now your front section is finished as far as the darts are concerned. All right, the next thing we're going to do is go on to the next page where it's asking us about N and S. And so N and S, it says 1/4 inch squared up from N. So here is N. So what it's to create S, we're going 1/2 inch, right? No, 1/4 inch up, 1/4 inch up. So up from there, and that is going to be S. The next thing is to draw a line from S to X. So we're going to go here. Our X was the halfway point right there. So we're going to draw a line from S to X. Then the next thing that we want to do is, and actually this line, this becomes a temporary portion of the line, really. So it's like this. We'll just put it in dots. Okay, then from on that line, we're going to create a diagonal line up from G. And for the size that we're working, size 8, 1 3/4 inch will be perfect. So a diagonal line, 1 3/4 of an inch up this way. And we're going to label that T. So the final thing is we're going to be creating and blending the line that's going to go start from S through X. It's going to come along this line that we created here, and it's going to touch T and then curve its way out to I. So we want a line that looks something like that. Okay, we could even, actually I'd like this line to be a little bit lower and kind of come into the bottom line a little bit sooner. So I'm going to adjust that line. So the one that I'm going to be using will be this lower line. Okay, so we're going to be doing something very similar now to the back. So in the back, K to U, we want to create a diagonal line. So K to U is going to be a diagonal at 1 1/4 inches. So here, 1 1/4 inches, we're going to call that U. And then this time we don't draw a diagonal line or move L. Our line is going to come down here, go through J, go through U, and end up at M. So we're going to be coming down and doing, and you can use your French curve to do this. I'm just going to draw it in by hand right now. So we're going to do a nice gentle line that's going to end up ending there. Okay? So now those are both our front rise. This will be considered our front rise and our back rise. The next step that we're going to do will be going from S. We want it to go to O at a slight curve. So we're going to curve this line slightly till it actually blends into the darts, and then that line would go over to O. On the front, we're going to drop our L by 1/4 of an inch, and here we're going to slightly, gently let that arch up until it hits the front dart leg as well. The other thing is the Q and the O are the side seam, and what we're going to do is curve this down to this point on both sides. But what we can do is we can equalize this. So right now it's 1.5 inches that I see as the difference between Q and O. So instead of having so much on this side and so little on that side, we can equalize that. So if we do that, it would be 3/4 of an inch on each side. So for we're going to move this over 3/4 of an inch and 3/4 of an inch. We're going to disregard O and Q at this point. And here we want to create a nice gentle hip curve that will come from the side seam and move to the hip. Okay, and whatever that curve is, we want to do the same one on the other side. That'll make for a nice, easy way to put in our pockets or anything that's going to go on the side. Okay, so now once we finish that part, we're moving to the final page. And here, what we're going to do is figure out what D to V is. And that's going to give us, if we're measuring along the crotch line, that's going to give us the grain line. So I've done the calculations here. It's 1/2 of D to I, which would be 4.5, plus 1/4 inch. Plus 1/4 inch plus the measurement from D to G, which is 9 5/8. So the total here is 14 3/8. So 14 3/8 from there. I'm going to, that would be this total measurement, 14 3/8. So the spot that we want is what is half of that. So it will be 7 and a little bit more than 1/8, okay, will be my halfway point. So I'm going to go 7 and about that. So from here to here and here to here should be the same, okay? So we're going to put that line in. What that's going to become is our grain line. So our grain line will be whatever that is we can square off from that line and draw a line straight up and down the piece. Okay, and then that same line will continue on to the top part. So draw that line in, and then you can continue it up to here as well. So when we cut our fabric, of course, this is going to be the straight grain that we're going to be cutting on. Okay, and this way it can go the whole way down to the hem. Okay, we're going to do the same thing on the front side. And on the front side, when we do all those calculations that it's asking for together again, it's 11 5/8. So half of that would be about 5 3/4, I think. 11. Yes. And that's going to come here. It usually comes almost to the dart or at the dart area. So either way, this should be halfway in between here and here. You can always do this method to check it. Let's see. Yep, there was my mark. Okay, so from that point, we're going to go again, do the grain line. It should be square from this whole crotch draft area. Okay, and same thing, go up and put that line in. It should be continuous. Okay, now we're going to work on the hem. So at the hem, where we had marked B originally, we want to create a square the whole way across. Now, looking at the back panel and our grain line, we want to do half of our pant leg on each side of that. So the measurement that we're going to use, because of the size that we're working on, is 4.5 inches. So I'm going to switch to my other ruler, and I want a spot 4.25. I'm sorry, 4.25 on each side. Okay, so we're going to mark that, and we're going to number those 1 and 2. Those aren't in the from the directions, but I just always like to number any spots. On the front, we're gonna do the same, but instead we're gonna use a measurement of 3 3/4 because the front panel is can be a little bit smaller than the back. 1 3/4, and we're gonna number those 3 and 4. Okay, so almost the final thing to do. We're going to draw a straight line from number 1 that goes up and meets to I. So if your ruler is too small, you can do something like I'm doing, where you lay one out, the other one's sitting right next to it, and it's going to help you to find that straight line. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing for the inseam. But here, I'm going to take it and I'm going to let it go from number 2 to D is what I'm aiming at, okay? So we're going to draw that line in. And on the front panel, we're going to do the same thing. So from number 3, we want to come back up to D. Just the reverse of what we just did. And then on the inseam, we're going to do the same thing. So here up to M, it's going to go from what our number 4 to M. Okay, the very final step that we're going to do will be to, we're going to add a little bit of a curve into the inseam of the leg. So we're going to take this last 4, or actually 5 inches down, and we're just going to bring this out here about 3/8 of an inch. Just a little bit, we're extending it, we're making that a little bit curved. That's going to make it easier for us to, for the inside of the leg, it's a little bit more comfortable. So we're going to curve that out a little bit and extend. And that will be it. So now our good lines are going to be, if we start at number 1, go up this curved line to I, up the rise to S, across our darts to the new hip line, which is this line, and back down, and then follow it this way to 2, and then back over to 1. That would be your back panel. Your front panel is going to be from number 3 up this way onto the curve to here, the dot that was next to Q, over, down the darts and back to the new line that's below L, this way, down the rise, down that little curved area, back to 4, and back over to 3. So you may want to go ahead and trace that in a different color so that you have all of your lines together. And I think that I'll show you what it will look like in a minute. Okay, now I've traced all of the good lines that are now in black, and then I added seam allowance. So I added 1/2 inch seam allowance everywhere. I folded my dart to get the dart intake, like we know how to do. Went down and added 1/2 inch, and I added 1 1/4 inches for the hem. 1 1/4 for hem, 1/2 inch everywhere else. Okay, on both the back and the front. So I separated the two pieces and created a back and a front. So what we will need to be cutting will be this, and we can mark this out on our pattern on the grain line. We are going to be, we're going to be cutting 2. This is a size 8. We know that this is the trouser front, or back, I'm sorry, back. We can always tell the back by the fact that it has a lower and a longer rise. The other thing, we're going to need to mark out notches. So I want, where X was, I want you to put 2 notches for the back. You'll be putting a notch here. You'll be putting notches, and I've already cut mine with my notcher there. Of course, the point, we're going to be putting a pin through to mark that. The other thing, I want you to put a notch here at the knee, and then a notch on each side at the hem. Same thing on the front. We're going to E, we're going to notch there. We're going to put 1 notch at X this time. We're going to notch here at our dart, and then we're going to mark and circle the point. That will be the pieces that you need. So again, we're going to cut 2 of this, making sure we're cutting it straight grain, size 8. And again, it's the trouser front. The other pieces that you will need for this will be a pocket, which I sent you an email that had the pocket pattern in it. So basically the pocket bag is what you're going to be making. So if this were where my pocket's going to go in the front of my garment, I want my bag to be big enough for my hand to fit into. So if you don't have that pattern, I would like you to do what I'm doing, which is putting your hand over top of your pattern and create something that looks like that. It's going to have the shape of just a place where your hand would go, the inside of your pocket. So then you can create a pattern from that particular piece, and we're going to cut 4. So cut 4 bags. The other thing you'll need will be the waistband. So here's what the bag pattern will end up looking like if you put it through there. Then we're going to use the same waistband that we used for the skirt. If you don't have that, the waistband is 32 inches by 3.5 inches. We will be cutting fusible half of the width like we did for the skirts that we made. Okay, so all those things need to be cut: fusible, 1 waistband, 4 bag pockets, 2 fronts and 2 backs, and those all need to be cut so that we can start to sew them.